did you want to use this time to practice our duet for our upcoming um, audio extraordinaire uh,
Um,
concert we have planned? The Kinetic Man
oh,
concert.
the Connect Man concert?
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't know that we had a plan, but I mean,
yeah. You didn't know about
actually,
that?
first heard. I thought as your business partner and potentially your co-singing author, we probably should share these plans with each other.
Oh, well, you were acting like you were practicing before the call here, before I started hitting record.
I was just singing a little Jesus song, you know what I mean? Just a little song.
You don't want to let our audience get a little
I
taste
actually
of it?
forgot. I literally just forgot the song I was singing. I forgot the words that I was singing. That's like it's a little bit concerning, kind of terrible. And I forgot what I was singing.
Fair enough.
Mm.
Fair enough. We'll hold it for another time.
Okay, just remind me what was I singing?
Don't worry about it.
Okay,
Let's move on. Let's move on. What are we talking about today?
we are talking about uh metacognitive physics,
Metacognition?
metacognition, metacognition. We had a awesome retreat a few weeks back, and I love Mr. Brandon Jones. Dude has forgotten more about thinking about thoughts than I know. And it was what was really cool, and I think it struck us both was this. He's working through some. We were working through a bunch of stuff, but one of the things he talked about is metacognition and thinking about your thoughts, right? And when I do one of the first things I do when I do one-on-one coaching is ask this question, and we did it in the mastermind today as well. But this idea of one, are you curious about yourself? Are you curious about do you think do you ever deeply consider your thoughts, right? And it's not just do you do it, but all of us have these thoughts, this internal language, this narrative that we're running. We all do it. It's just whether or not we are curious on what it is, and if we're willing to take a an assessment or an inventory of the types of words and stories we tell ourselves. Because if you're willing to do that, then you could probably you're going to come up with some pretty interesting revelations in self-awareness and recognize that um, a lot of times these thoughts are actually driving actions, and it's unconscious, right? It's not something that uh, you're doing it, but it's sometimes it's such an ingrained path that you don't even recognize how you're potentially sabotaging yourself or any of these things. And so the importance of understanding your thought processes and how you think and the stories you tell yourself is absolutely critical to self-awareness and growth.
Yeah, man. What was interesting to me is this idea of kind of the short-term memory versus the long-term memory. And that short-term memory comes in just the thought, right? Just thinking of something and then moving on. I mean, if you think about it, you'll probably forget it pretty shortly there afterwards, unless you actually take action on that thing, right? So metacognition is to a place where like you're thinking about your thoughts, but moving a step past that is then you're actually intentionally acting on those thoughts in a way to go from short-term memory to long-term memory. And
Make them stick.
that's where like it really truly sticks. Yeah. Super interesting.
Well, yeah, and he said, well, and it's funny because we did not intend this, but the fact that I forgot the song I was singing just seconds before we hit record is a great indicator. But there's also I love what he said. He said we're actually that short term memory is typically, I think he said, is 7 seconds. He's like, but we're getting dumber, so now it's 4. 4 seconds when you have those thoughts and then they disappear and you never think about them, you forget them, whatever. And it's not committed to long term. But one of the things as we were talking through this, this is a quote. I had been reading this quote for a while. It came across from a number of different things, podcasts I've been listening to, and then just some reading I was doing. But this same quote in different forms was coming up. But Ralph Waldo Emerson said, sow a thought and you reap an action. Sow an action or sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. Our destiny is tied. So ultimately, our destiny is tied directly to and starts with our thoughts, right? And I find that to be so fascinating, profound, because if our thoughts are something that we're not thinking about, or we're not taking stock of what we're thinking about, then how do you ever get to your destiny? Right. And our destiny is something we think about often. And just like, in any context, the body that I want and the muscles that I want and the strength I want are something that I think about often. But do I think about what it takes to get there? Do I think about all the contributing factors, not to include not only the time, but the workouts and the diet and all this stuff, right? And if you don't backwards plan from that, then you're never going to be able to really achieve that thing. It's just going to be a goal. It's going to be a want, a desire, but it's not going to be ingrained, and it's not going to be who you are. And so that's why, when you talk about this destiny and our purpose, or however you want to frame that, even if you don't go all the way to that, but our character,
Yeah.
a lot of the foundation for these things starts with our thoughts. And by not thinking about your thoughts, by not taking an inventory of what you say and think and the way you talk to yourself in your mind, you rob yourself of the ability to build the appropriate actions, which then build the habits, which then build to your character, which then builds to your destiny.
Two thoughts come to mind as you're talking. One, we have to put in place a process, a tool, something that you can have readily available to be able to write down those thoughts, right? Whether that's a journal, whether that's a notepad, whether it's the notes on your phone, whether that's Asana. I task myself quite often. Something will come to mind, and I'll get into Asana, and it's a tool that I just basically task myself with. I know you text yourself, but some type of system, tool, program that you have readily available with you all the time. When you have those thoughts, right? Like when you have something that comes to mind, that you can think about your thoughts, but then further that action with those thoughts. Second thing that comes to mind. Did you have something to say to that?
No, well, and I'm thinking of all the times, like it happens daily, where I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a good idea.
Yeah,
That was a good idea. And so the the process, making the process part of your long-term memory for me is a challenge. And I am way more often than not. It's like fly fishing. I've missed way more fish than I've caught, right?
yeah.
I've so many ideas that I'm like when I immediately think of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like, I need to, well, I need to do something with that. Well, if it was part of my ingrained memory, long-term memory process to just write it down, then there'd be an opportunity to act on those things. But because I don't do that regularly or effectively, it just goes, right? Just goes.
So I think the causal factor to that, which is leads to my second thought, is we as human beings, as Americans, and even as men, I don't think we give ourselves enough margin to be able to allow ourselves to have those moments, because we're so busy all the time. It's meeting to call to appointment, to go get the kids to soccer games, to practice, to whatever it is. And it's just nonstop. And we have never built in margin in our lives to give ourselves the opportunity to actually like think about it, right? Like to sit down and sit in our thoughts and journal and write it out. And one of the books that I've read a long time ago, I need to reread it. It's really good. It's called The Road Less Stupid, and he calls it thinking time. He basically gives himself a 30-minute block of window every single morning with a blank sheet of paper or a notebook and a pen. He asks himself a question, and then he just brainstorms. And he
Well, that's
calls
his
it,
habit now, right? That's his
yeah,
habit.
that's his habit.
Yeah. And I think it's even more nefarious than that, dude. I think that it's not only we don't give ourselves margin, but the nefarious side of it is that we have believed the lie that if I'm doing like go, 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 if it's constant, then I'm winning, then I'm succeeding,
That's success.
then I'm like accomplishing.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's not true. You're just busy. Like you're just doing things, and a great example, and I've heard this in a number of sermons, is Jesus. Like, and they, when you talk about, and for us, like that is the epitome, that is the example, right? Jesus. And when you look at his life, dude was never in a hurry.
No.
He was never in a hurry. Even when someone came to him and they're like, hey, my kid is dying. And he's like, okay, I'll be there. And then they leave or whatever. And then they're like, don't worry about it, they're dead. And you're like, no, 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 they're not dead. And then he goes into the village and he gets laughed at, and then he goes and resurrects him, right? Or even like his best friend, Lazarus, just, he wasn't in a hurry.
Right.
I say best friend, a dear friend of his, wasn't in a hurry. It's a very interesting story, because it come out, Lazarus is dead, he's weeping for his dear friend, and then he bring back anyways, right? But the point is, he didn't sprint to do that. He wasn't in a hurry. He was never in a hurry. Always built in time. He's always prioritized prayer. He was, the Bible always talks about him going out to pray, whether early in the morning, late at night, whatever. It was such a critical part of his life, of his life bread, right? Of everything that he was about, was this time that was spent away, whether in the wilderness and solitude, whatever. But he did it, and he did it often. And I'm like, wow, if Jesus did it and I'm nowhere near as awesome as Jesus, like, should I Sabbath? Should I take time? Should I go out in prayer? Should I solitude, the practice of solitude, fasting, like all these different things? Should I be doing those things? Well, yes, I should be, because that's the example. And he was never in a hurry.
Yeah. Brings me to another thought as you're as you're talking, just about this idea of, of that hurry, of that hustle. And we've talked a lot about John Mark Comer. He has a great podcast and a great book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And that led me to another book called To Hell with the Hustle by Jefferson Bethke. And he talks about formations, like becoming someone of like our values, and comparing that to like goals. Do we set a goal and we aim to accomplish that goal, and what happens when we get to that goal? It's done, right? And then we just set another goal, right? But if you look at it in the idea of formation, like how are we forming ourselves to become somebody that's in less of a hurry, that's practicing the ways of Jesus, that is a leader in the community, is healthy, is a great dad, is a great husband, is a great leader, a friend. Those are formations. Those are things we're becoming, and it's nonstop. We're always going to be growing. We're always going to be becoming better at that. And you can't do that. You can't do that if you're always in a hurry, if there is no margin, if you're not thinking about your thoughts, if you are not putting actions and daily habits into place to form yourself into a better person that you want to become. It's just not possible. And so, back to the original discussion of metacognition and thinking about your thoughts, putting those down on paper, having the time and the space to do that, then forming actions to those things, that all requires intentionality, which I think a lot of people are not doing right now.
Yeah, dude. I love it. I love it. It's definitely a topic worth diving into. It's definitely something that we should set time aside every day, even if it's like 2 minutes, right? Just building in the habit of, as you're going through some thoughts, particularly the negative ones, because it's probably far outweigh the positive ones, to take note of those, right? As a practical exercise, as you're going through and you cycle into whatever it is that you're thinking about, whether it's somebody else or going down this path, just to take a pause and think about it. Be like, oh, what am I thinking about? Where'd that come from? How is that serving me? And can I change that? Because you can, right? You absolutely can. And I'll tell you, all it requires is just to interrupt it sometimes, just to interrupt it and be like, why and usually, because again, short term, unless you've, and the other side of this is that there's probably certain thought processes that you've traveled that path so many times, it's just natural now. And that's going to take more work to interrupt. And my recommendation is acknowledge it, interrupt it, acknowledge it, and then think about something different, right? And start building those new those new habits, those new pathways to when that thought, excuse me, the ideal is that when that thought comes up, your new process is such that it diverts to where you want it to go now. And so again, but it requires effort, right? It's a little bit hard. It is a little bit hard. And it requires us to do a little bit of effort, maybe to be a little bit better. But the benefits, I think, definitely far outweigh any kind of work you're going to put into that.
One more thought. You should stop yelling at your football team so much because they're losing all the time. So you don't lose your voice while we're doing podcast recordings.
Yeah, I mean, I can do that. I can try that. But then who's going to be there to tell them how far below the standard they're living? I'm just kidding. I love you, boys. If you ever listen to this,
good stuff.
All right.
Think about
Good
your
stuff.
thoughts. Take action. Be intentional. Take
Think
uncommon
about your
action.
thoughts. Metacognitive physiologists. Do it.
Yeah. Do it.
Science is cool. Be
Bye now.
kinetic.